little background in terms of how we use AgileAssets. And first of all, let me thank Joe, our host here today, AgileAssets. I'm very impressed with not only the fact that they bring the users together, but the tone of this workshop. We calling this a workshop, user event, Joe? What do we call this?
User conference, but it's really a workshop environment.
Yeah, and I'm just very impressed with the tone that's set. And it's very much, what I've already taken out of this, it's very much about you and what you need to do your jobs. And so really the theme of what I want to talk about here today is really, what are the questions that I ask? And those questions are the questions that I turn to our folks at the DOT that we need to answer. And I think it helps form the decisions that we make to help move an agency forward. We in Utah have had a history of developing our own systems. And we feel pretty good about that. We've developed some really nice systems in Utah to help us manage our organization. We have a very nice, we call it EPM, Electronic Project Management System, that manages all of our projects from inception all the way through the construction process. And we basically took a system from South Carolina, an old Fortran-based system. We took that algorithm and we wrapped the Utah theme, the Utah flavor around it. And it's a system that we've been using now for probably 15 plus years. Back around that time, we also had our own maintenance management system. And it started as a Fortran-based system running on our statewide, Jerry, what was it, a 3220 IBM at the Capitol or something like that? It was an old mainframe-based system that we basically were limping forward with. We had one guy in the organization that kind of knew it down to the kernel level and could kind of keep that going. But when we made the decision that we needed to jump, this was one of the first times that we said, you know what, we're not going to be in the development process anymore for systems because we just can't keep up. We can't keep up with the technology. We want to make sure that we have the latest and greatest to be able to do the best for our organization. And so we made the decision to, and it's a hard decision, to go to our legislature and essentially ask for what we call a building block. So in the budget, we get a building block to get money to be able to move forward with acquiring and developing a system. And you know, for transportation, at least in Utah, it's really taking money out of one pocket and putting it in the other. But the legislature has to make that decision for us because everything's contained within the transportation fund. There's really essentially no new money available for transportation. It's just how we allocate it. And so what we did at the DOT is we took our subcommittee, our legislative subcommittee, appropriations committee, we took them out to a couple of maintenance stations. Because the first thing, you know, when you start talking about maintenance management system, sorry guys, outside this room there's very few people that know what the heck you're talking about. And so you have to be able to take some technical concepts and boil them down into a language that, you know, basically these volunteers, and you know, when you look at least in Utah, legislators, it's a part-time job, 45-day session every year plus 1 day a month. So pretty limited government. And these are folks from all walks of life. And they can have various degrees of technical expertise. But you have to be able to take complicated concepts and boil them down into simple ideas for them to be able to make decisions. And that's really our job. I consider myself a translator. So I take the stuff from the department and I translate it to the legislature so that they can make the best decisions possible. And sometimes we roll our eyes and we say, boy, that was a bad decision by these elected officials. And we, as an organization, have to take some responsibility for those decisions because perhaps we were not effective enough in how we communicated. And so that's a big part of what we need to do and be responsible for. And don't assume that what you know is known by anyone else. Think about how you're going to communicate what you know, and think about how you're going to communicate it very quickly, because people's attention span is limited. And so that was a big part of our job. But we were able to convince the legislature that we could be more effective with the transportation money. We could do a better job managing our road system if we had a more up-to-date system. And so we were able to have them set aside $3 million. Now, to some of you states, North Carolina, Texas, We're a tiny little state. I was talking to Elizabeth here from Texas during our little intro that Joe had us do, and I was saying that I think they have 25 districts plus headquarters. Each one of Texas districts is the size of the entire Utah Department of Transportation. We are the second smallest in terms of people Department of Transportation in the country. And honestly, our legislature thinks that's great. And we think it's pretty good too, because we leverage the private sector more so than we've ever done before. So we're pretty new to the the area of going out and getting what do they call it? Commercially available software, COTS or something like that. I can't remember the acronym. But so AgileAssets was one of the first systems that we really went out from a business system perspective and said we're going to the private sector to help us do this. And from everything I hear from our folks, it's been a very successful partnership to date, and we look forward to pushing the envelope and actually becoming a better Department of Transportation with the use of our private sector partners. This is what we have here is a bridge move that we did on our I-15 rebuild job. We have a I-15 core job going in Utah County right now. Those of you that don't know Utah, it's the county just below Salt Lake County. It's a county of about 500,000 people, and we're rebuilding I-15 through this section. And we're doing it in about 2.5 years. It's a $1.725 billion job. And they are rebuilding the entire interstate without taking away a single lane of existing capacity. And that was a really important thing for us, because the way we handle traffic during construction has been considered one of our strengths as an organization. And so what we do, and we've been doing quite a bit now, I think we've done more than, I think if you take all the other states in the country and combine them together, we've done more bridge moves like this than any other state. And it's been a very positive reception from our elected officials and from the public, and they expect us to do this kind of stuff all the time. And so we put this on the front cover of our strategic document, and it gets us great kudos. So it ended up here on the front page of my presentation. It has no basis whatsoever of what we want to talk about, but it's a pretty cool picture. And being able to go out and spend an evening with legislators wearing blue jeans and boots and hard hats, and being able to get them known on a one-on-one level because they're out there watching us move a bridge has actually been more beneficial probably than actually moving the bridges by themselves. So take advantage of any opportunity you can to be able to have a good dialogue. Again, this is really about being able to answer the questions. And I want to start off here with an assumption. And it's what I would like us all to understand, at least it's what I believe strongly. And everyone will always say there's never enough resources. And I'm going to submit to you that that's a good thing. There should never be enough resources. As soon as you find yourself in a position where you've got enough money to do everything you think you need to do, you better watch your back end, because you've got too much money. You as a transportation professional, as a system professional, should always be in the position of having to make hard choices and to make trade-offs between how you spend the public's money. Think about that. It's not your money. You're a steward of the public's money. And you should always be responsible for answering the question, how did I spend the public's money? Did I spend it the best way possible? Was I efficient with that? Did I get out of that expenditure what I wanted to get out of it? And if you're not always asking yourself those questions, then you better be careful, because you're not dealing with your money. You're dealing with somebody else's money. And this is a very, very important currency for all of us. It's the trust that the public has in us as professionals. And until we accept that, we're really not going to move forward as a transportation agency. So don't ever find yourself not moving forward in any endeavor or not making decisions because you say there aren't enough resources. Take what you have and put them to work the best way possible. and appreciate the fact that you're in that driver's seat. You're playing a part. No single one person does anything. I'm sorry. You may want to stand up and take credit for something, but it takes a huge team of people to do any one thing. And so always remember that how you spend the public's money is of critical importance. And I think it's a good thing not to have enough money for everything. It forces you to make choices. It forces you to make very hard choices. And I think that leads into what I want to talk about here today. And it talks about, I think, what our partners, AgileAssets, is trying to give us the tools to do is to answer those questions, to try to make the choices between how we spend our money. I just made a mistake, didn't I? What did I say? Our money, thank you. You guys are good. I'm sorry, here, I'm going to have to pull these out every now and then. Okay, I just wanted to talk a little bit here about, this is a little bit of an outline here of what I want to talk about. And it's, the general theme is how we're managing assets within the Department of Transportation. But really, what sits on top of that is how we manage the organization and how we gain public trust and how we know we're moving forward in the right direction. So I'll talk a little bit about what drives us, our strategic documents, our strategic direction that we have. Then I'll talk a little bit about some of the history. And I'd like to set forward a challenge. And the challenge is more to just try to energize everyone here to think about how you need to push our partners here. How we need to push them in a direction that will help you be able to answer the questions that are important to you. And that's what I wanted to really lay out for you today. So basically, in simple words, this is what I like to do is, what are we trying to accomplish? What is the condition of your stuff? Your stuff. I'm going to talk about stuff and things and very technical things. About setting targets and goals, how to budget to achieve to your goals and targets, measure and report your results, whether or not you did stuff good or bad, and then making adjustments. And really, it's just that continual cycle. This is a section out of our strategic document here. And what we do is, this is a very short document. When I first came into I've been in this position now since May of '01. And our executive director, John Nord, and myself were put in by then Governor Leavitt into the role here of the leadership of the organization. And when we first started, we had a strategic document that was comprised of 23 strategic goals. Each goal was 3, 4, 5 sentences long. And if you really read this thing, I'm not sure anyone did, but if you read this thing, it was basically a reverse justification for every function within the organization. So was this driving the direction of the organization, or was the inertia of the department setting the strategic document? We were reverse justifying our positions, essentially. And so we stepped back from that. We said we want to have a strategic direction that actually drives what we do, and we can start to budget around it. And so we came up, we laid it out in March, the strategic document. And March has a unique thing within America here, and we called it the Final Four because we had 4 strategic goals. And we were very cute. My communications director doesn't like this at all, but it's stuck in my head, and that's the way it comes out every time. He tried to get it. We just updated the document, and I'll show you the goals that we changed to. We made some adjustments to them. But he says, we're not going to call it the Final Four anymore. And I could never stop saying it, so he says, okay, I give up. We'll call it the Final Four. But what it does is it identifies the what. And when you see these, you're going to say those are pretty simple things. But we want the strategic document to define the what. We want our employees to define how they're going to achieve the what. And so that was one of the basic principles. The other one that we had is we wanted to keep it simple. We wanted the goals to be something that every employee knew. Every single employee should know these strategic goals, and they should understand how their position, their work, affects those goals. And if they don't know that, then We wanted to have a discussion about really the role of their position. And there's lots of jobs within all organizations that are absolutely necessary, even though at times they're very difficult to say, how do I affect these strategic goals? The public needs to buy into what you're achieving. This is a really important concept. You cannot be thinking you can operate because, face it, a lot of times back 25, 30 years ago, DOTs around the country would operate because we knew best. I went to a lot of public meetings, a lot of public hearings, and it was essentially a show for DOT to say we've checked the box and we're just going there to tell the public what we're going to do because we know what's best for them. And that's no longer the case anymore. So the public has to buy into what you want to do. We think consistency is important. If you're trying to drive and affect changes on a system-wide basis, trying to affect 80,000 miles of pavement conditions, if you're trying to affect thousands of bridge conditions, these aren't things you change in a year, 5 years. These are things you change over time. So we think having consistency of direction is important. The strategic document needs to drive your budget decisions. And if it's not driving your budget decisions, what the heck are you doing with this thing? And we need to make sure that it drives our organizational structure. You don't wrap a strategic document around an existing organization. Your direction as an organization needs to drive how you configure your organization. Your people are the most important resource that you have. So this is, on the left side, is what we had for 10 years as a strategic direction. We take care of what we have, and so then we had strategies under there. You guys can all come up with what these are, right? Pavement preservation, bridge preservation, snow removal was under there. We make the system work better. Timing of traffic lights. I know the public sometimes seems convinced that we've never timed a traffic light in our life, but we actually do. Ramp meters, on and on. We improve safety. We have a goal of 0 fatalities. We're trying to drive towards that. And we increase capacity. Well, we made a big change. After 10 years, we revamped our strategic document. And what did we end up with? Well, we felt, and we ground tested this, doing focus groups. Does the word preservation mean anything to people? And it did. People understand infrastructure and preservation. So we wanted very much to go to preserve infrastructure. I'm sorry if I'm walking in front of this for the folks over here. When we first started this 10, 11 years ago. But it didn't resonate with the public that well when we did our focus groups. Now it's something that they get. So we were able to transition to something that externally, it really meant the same thing to people, and it's really driving the same strategies within our organization, but it's a little more descriptive of what we're trying to do. We took two, and I know these arrows are a little confusing here, but we took the increased capacity and make the system work better, and we combined that into optimized mobility. And we're still a very fast-growing state. We're adding a lot of capacity. For a little state, we have about $3.3 billion of capacity projects under construction right now. And improved safety obviously remains as one of our key drivers. And then we added a new one here. And this was to align with one of the goals that's really important to our governor, and it's important to the public right now, and it's to strengthen the economy. And I'll talk a little bit about this a little later. But this sucker right here is affected by the work you do in several ways. Not only in the type of work you do and the type of projects that you select, because you pick projects to do either to preserve a pavement or to add capacity, or whatever those projects are. You have to make key strategic decisions about what projects you're going to do. But you also, it's how you do your work, how you affect the economy while you're going about delivering your projects. When we saw that bridge move thing where we're moving a bridge in overnight and there's absolutely no impact on the public except for that about 5-6 hours during the middle of the night, that has a big dramatic effect in terms of how the commerce works throughout that area. So these are the goals. This is the what we have, and this is what we do. Essentially, this is my performance plan. Every one of our region directors, our group leaders, they have a performance plan that tees off of my performance plan, and every one of their employees tees off of their leader's performance plan. And we do this to try to assure that we have alignment within our organization so that every employee in the organization has had an opportunity to have a discussion with their leader in terms of what do I need to do, how do I need to do it to be able to move the organization forward to achieve these strategic goals. And you may say, why are you talking about this? We're here at a users conference for a payment management system, a maintenance management system, and a lot of other new stuff I just found out about, Joe, so I listened. What does this have to do with it? I think this is key to everything. This is what drives, this is why we do maintenance management. This is why we do payment management, is to make sure that we're successful in moving towards these goals. I'm going to talk just very quickly at a high level here on some of this stuff now. Has anybody not seen this picture? Has anybody not seen this? Good. Oh, one person. Okay. Then I've got a purpose here today. This is essentially a very generic deterioration model. And the people that manage the pavements, the people that manage the bridges, you have unique deterioration curves for every asset on your system. When it's brand new, I was wondering if it was a smart board. It's perfect condition, and over time it starts to deteriorate based on the traffic loading, the initial construction, environmental conditions. That rate's going to be unique for every section of pavement, for every sign face, for every stripe on the road. So the idea is, and this is something I use with every legislator. We have 104 legislators. Every one of them has had I'll call it the opportunity to visit with me to have a discussion about good roads cost less. And why we will be working on good roads, because a lot of people are always asking that question. We got a stinky road over here. Why aren't you working on that? Well, we're going to just let that one go because we've lost it already. We're going to let it go farther down that deterioration curve. We're going to get as much life out of it as we can because it's the right economical decision to make. But we can, with this concept, legislators' eyes kind of come on and they say, I get it. I understand why it's important for you to have a preservation program. I understand why you need to be out there working on these roads that you just worked on 6, 7 years ago. That makes sense to me. It's the right thing to do. But we can't assume they're going to understand this. We have to constantly communicate this and get that idea across. So it's part of our, you can call it messaging or whatever, but it's about keeping our assets in good condition. And we're doing a pretty good job. Now, I have a gentleman here from Utah who I say puts these together for me. He probably turns to somebody else to do it, Stan. But what we have here is we spend about $205 million a year on our pavements, just purely pavement conditions. Now, our capacity programs are obviously investing in pavements as well, but those decisions aren't driven because of pavement condition. They're driven primarily for other reasons. But what you see here is a representation of the condition based on smoothness of our roads. And I told you I was going to ask you, I'm going to share some of the questions I ask. One of the questions I've been asking for years is, well, tell me what the right condition is to keep our pavements in for the lowest life cycle cost. Should it be an IRI of, should 90% be, I mean, good or better? What should the number be? What target should I set? System-wide. Does anybody know how to answer that question? Well, Stan's folks did a lot of work on this, and they basically did they ran through a lot of investment scenarios to determine at which point additional investment would not make a noticeable difference in condition to get to be able to try to answer this question as best as possible. Now, what we did is we've got this little bracket here that we're trying to keep our road conditions within, and we've been looking out here. It shows 2016. We've gone out 2020 stand, 2025, looking at the various investment scenarios that we need to keep investing at every year in order to keep the conditions where they need to have the lowest life cycle cost. And that's the question that I think we all need to be able to answer. What is the lowest life cycle cost, the condition to keep our assets in that will give us the lowest life cycle cost? Now, one of the things that we made a hard decision a couple years ago, and I'll touch a little bit on this a little later here, but we realized that we did not have enough money to keep all of our roads in the same condition. Essentially, we were treating all our children the same. All children get a new car, all children are going to go to college, blah, blah, blah. We couldn't afford to do that. And so what we did is we segregated out roads that served less than 2,000 vehicles a day. And we said we cannot afford to be proactive on that road system. It's almost 50% of our road system, but it's a very low number of lane miles relative to the haul system. But centerline miles, it represents a fair amount of the system. It's rural Utah, essentially. And we went to a reactive model on those pavements, but what that's allowed us to do is to keep our interstates and our heavily trafficked roads, the roads that carry our trucks, in a very good condition. And it's going to cost us a lot less money because maintaining the low volume roads in a reactive model is nowhere near as expensive as maintaining it in a highly urbanized area. Now, it's something that I still find interesting. When I think about Utah, I know my relatives back east think of Utah as this big, wide, open, rural area, and most of our state is rural, but our population lives all within a concentrated area of the Wasatch Front. Utah is the 8th most urbanized area for a state in terms of where our population lives, which I still find hard to believe. But that's what the latest census data showed. So we're doing good on pavement condition. And this is all slides that I present to our legislature and to our governor. It goes up as part of our scorecard that we report on all the time. So, and this is all coming out of our management systems. Bridges. We've got some very good bridges. And this can be a little deceptive here because it looks to me, when I look at this information, that we're on a pretty good path here and things are very rosy. What this doesn't represent is we're able to right now replace, outside of our capacity program again, we're able to replace about 15 bridges a year with our bridge program. Well, we've got a whole series of bridges coming online, essentially due in they're coming up to 50 years. When, the bubble for the interstate building era in the 1960s and early 70s that we're going to have to start replacing. We're going to have to move from a model of replacing 15 bridges a year to 50 bridges a year. And we don't have a funding source for that. And so I didn't bring any of the measures that show that, but what this shows here is, again, you can slice the time and represent conditions that tell a different story than what you really need to. So what we do during our appropriations committee meetings is we bring in the backlog of bridges that we're going to have to face. So the legislature is aware of it. It's not about scaring them. It's not about forcing them to do things. It's about public transparency. Public needs to be aware of what their infrastructure is doing and what's happening out there. So bridges are good today, challenge tomorrow. Optimize mobility. You can see on the side the types of things here. We say innovative crossroads. We've been doing a lot of diverging diamond interchanges. If you guys haven't started looking into these DDIs, incredibly efficient. It's amazing how much traffic these things move, even compared to a single point urban interchange. So we're now putting in a lot of these, and they're cheaper than putting in SPUIs as well. But things like, we call them CFIs, contraflow intersections, where you make the left turn before the intersection itself, and you basically take the left turn out of that traffic phase. You can eliminate 1 or 2 traffic phases in a busy, at-grade intersection. Through turns, Michigan U-turns, people know them as that. So we're doing a lot of that type of thing, addressing choke points, and the public loves that stuff. Now, what does this have to do with asset management? Because you guys are dealing with stuff, right? Pavements, bridges, trucks. This has everything to do with it. This is one of the commodities that we need to make sure that we optimize on. People's time. And we're going to have to find that common denominator. I'm convinced that people's time, bringing it down to dollars, users' cost, is how we're going to be able to do the trade-off analysis. But when you make investments decisions, if you as professionals are siloed and thinking just about stuff, and you're not thinking about people's time as equivalent, then we're missing the boat. And we're not going to gain traction. It's all part of the puzzle that we need to solve. And so bringing in mobility issues, bringing in people's time into the equation is something that you as professionals need to be thinking through how you're going to do that. How are you going to make recommendations within your organization to make investments if you're not considering these things? We can never be just about one thing. This is a pretty interesting graph, and I know it's a little busy here, and I'll try to explain it. This represents just 4 counties in one of our MPOs, and they had a little bit more, I'll say, sophistication of traffic modeling capabilities, and so we asked them to take a look at this for us. And so we're starting back here at 1995, I think it is. Yep. And projecting forward in time. And basically in 1995, just a little after that, we started some major capacity programs in Utah because we're a very fast-growing state. And if you look at the blue line, that represents the amount of delay per day that would accumulate. Look at the numbers that we're talking about. Almost 1.2 million hours of delay per day in just these 4 counties if we hadn't implemented any capacity programs. It's just massive. What do you think that would do to your economy? What do you think that does to the amount of crashes you'd have out there? All of this stuff is connected. Well, what we did then is we said, well, if we have no more capacity improvements after 2015, what would our delay be? Essentially, this is everything that we had in our STIP prior to last Friday. Because last Friday we added a bunch more capacity projects, and we're going to bring this line down here because we've implemented quite a bit more of the long-range plan. But this takes us through the execution of the long-range plan down here if all the funding assumptions in the long-range plan are taken into account. There's value here. There's value here. There's as much value here or more. I don't know. But there's value here that we need to quantify, and we need to bring to the table and compare against the value of making investments in every other choice we make. Great story. I think most states are seeing success in the area of safety, and we're down to levels we haven't seen since the early 70s. And obviously, like all of you, the amount of vehicle miles traveled on our roadway has grown exponentially. Our population increases quite a bit, about 3% a year, but our travel, and this is not unique to Utah, this is what's happening across the country. Essentially, vehicle travel is doubling the amount of population growth. People are more mobile. They expect to be able to get from point A to point B faster. They're making more trips. Think about your personal life. When you're out there, you go to work. How many of you just go straight home? How many stops do you make on the way home? How many activities are the kids involved in throughout the day? So being able to drive down fatalities while traffic is increasing is a real success story for our industry. And let's acknowledge it. Vehicle manufacturers have done an exceptional job with technology in the vehicles. The engineering companies, the DOTs, have done a great job with putting safety apparatus on the roadways, making roadways safer. We're getting involved in education. We go out into every high school. We talk about texting and driving. We bring a crashed vehicle to let the kids climb through and get an idea of the violence of an impact of a vehicle and what speeds really can do. And these are all things that we need to keep in mind when we make our investment decisions. How much money should we invest in safety things? Well, we had a large crossover accident problem in Utah. And when cable barrier came around, cable barrier was a fairly cost-effective way to prevent crossover accidents. And what you see here is the fatalities from crashes from a crossover vehicle versus the investment we've made in cable barrier in the red line here. All of a sudden now, we've now made a significant jump in investment here in cable barrier, and we're not seeing the same drop in those crossover crashes because we're starting to install cable barrier now in areas that don't have the frequency. I mean, a lot of this is about just numbers. And so is continuing to install cable barrier the right thing here? We're asking that question. We're asking that question based on the results that we're seeing in these measures. And I think in places it is, but in other places it isn't. Centerline rumble strip might be the answer on lower volume roads where we don't have the numbers. And so based on the message here is be able to measure your results, your outcomes. Know what outcomes you're trying to achieve, but be able to measure them and then report them and then make decisions based on what you measure so that you can help move your agency forward, again, towards those goals that you've set in your strategic document. This is a question that we always ask ourselves, well, was that capacity project worth it? Did we invest in the right project? And so what we're doing here, again, we're just starting to learn about this in this area here under strengthening the economy. Coming up with the goal was easy, you know. Figuring out the direct effect of our organization and the way to measure those, this one's going to be a tough one for us to crack. So this is our first shot at it this year in terms of trying to report some results. But what you see across the bottom here are some various fairly small projects in terms of investments and the amount of user time saved based on the capacity improvement, measuring from before and after, and translating that time into user costs. And so we're trying to measure the benefits of our decisions. And so this is one of the ways we've tried to do that. So just want to summarize up this piece here on the strategic document, on measurements, is that we know where we want to go. We know what we're working on. We make our investments to try to move us in the right direction. We measure our results. Based on those results, we make decisions, we make choices, and we choose where to move money so that we could try to achieve, get farther ahead. And that, to me, is a fundamental basis that we all need to have as an organization to move forward. And the tools that we have to help us do this are critical. And they need to become increasingly more sophisticated. Because, guys, the days of us saying, trust me, this is the right decision, they're over. And then you know what? Rightly so. We need to, remember when you were in school, what did your teacher always say to you? Show your work, right? We've got to show our work. We've got to show why we're making these decisions, what the outcome was, whether it was good or bad, and then we need to move forward based on those outcomes. So that's just a summary of that section here. A little bit about wide screen here. It stretched it out a little bit. Just a little bit about how we got into this game of asset management at UDOT. We've been practicing the good roads cost less philosophy for 20 plus years. We've always known it was the right thing to do. I think everyone here has always known it's the right thing to do. But we really never had the type of top-down, I'm talking about governor or legislative, understanding of what we're trying to do as an organization and why we're trying to do it. And it really goes back a little bit in time, but I'm going to take us back to, in 1997, we launched, I think it was the nation's first design-build job for transportation. And that was a reconstruction of I-15 in Salt Lake County. It was a $1.32 billion project. And we had this thing called the Olympics staring us down the throat that everyone said, you got to get this job done before the Olympics. And being that we had no model to really look at for design build, we designed in several what we called quality hooks. And there was quality hooks like, well, everyone knows incentive, disincentive, but we had one that was a requirement that the contractor had to bid a maintenance contract. And we started off saying we want a maintenance contract for 20 years. And the bonding companies came unglued. They just said, no way, we're going to issue bonds to cover a 20-year maintenance contract. We ended up with having them bid a 10-year maintenance contract for this job. And they had to give us a price. So it wasn't part of the original bid price for this project, but it was a number that sat out there. And we had the option of whether or not to execute this sucker up till 2 months before we had substantial completion on the project. And so do you think this design-build contractor approached the job differently because he may or may not have responsibility to maintain it over 10 years? We thought so. And so that was one of those things that let us go to sleep at night, because you're always worried about, when you go from a world that we all know really well of, really specification-based, you do it this way, we know what we're going to get, to more of a performance-based, this is what we want, you guys can choose how to do it. That was a big leap of faith for us as an organization. And when you make that jump, we said we're going to go and have this little quality hook that they have to own the maintenance. And that really, we think, helped motivate them to provide a quality job. Facts be known, the consortium that came in to do this work, their pride is such that they would never have delivered a poor quality job. I know that now. I didn't know that when we first started the job. I really didn't. But these folks in our industry that are delivering our projects out on the road, they're incredibly proud, and they want to do a good job. So we chose not to execute the maintenance contract because we said we can do it for less. We don't need it. And that took some fancy explaining to our legislature. We needed to show up and explain to them why we could do it for less when this was part of a bid. Because isn't the private sector more efficient than the public sector? A lot of cases they are. That's the assumption that our legislature had. How crazy of UDOT to come and say that they can do it better and for less. And so we needed to do a lot of explaining to the legislature. And I'll tell you what, every time you think you have something that you don't like to do, look at it as an opportunity. Because you don't see it when you're in it, in the middle of it. It's like, oh gosh, another presentation, more explaining. This is hard. When you look back at it now, this was taking place in the spring of '01. It was the best thing that happened to us. Because we had a chance to speak with all of our legislators ad nauseum about what it takes to maintain a road and what decisions we make. It was a great opportunity. And the word asset management then became something that our legislators knew what it was, and they kind of understood it. And we came out of this with support not only for us having a robust asset management system within the department, but also for them realizing we need to invest more in taking care of what we have. And that's what they called it, taking care of what we have. Well, more to come on that. We really quite haven't gotten the money yet. But it's a very interesting point in time for us, and it made a big difference in our elected officials' understanding of what we do and how we do it. And I look at that as one of the key points in our department. I think everyone here has probably gone through this, the asset management self-assessment. We as an organization, our senior leadership team, we sat down, we spent 3 days in workshops going through this. I would encourage any organization to go back, revisit this self-assessment, and look for where your gaps are. And use this to help set direction for you as what you need to be working on to move forward. Because I'm convinced of this. We know where we want to go, but we're never going to get there because that thing's going to keep moving down the road. And that's what's so great about what we do. Things are going to keep getting better and better. We're going to have better and better tools, and we're going to keep moving our profession of designing, managing, operating, maintaining our transportation system. We're going to keep doing that better than ever before. But I encourage everyone here to revisit the self-assessment. It helps set the direction for us in terms of how we are going to implement asset management in the organization. Okay. I said this earlier here. It's really a journey. One of the other things that we decided to do is when that gap analysis came out, it's a little humbling. Because, oh my gosh, we got a ton of stuff to do. I can't believe we're this bad. I thought we were good. Start slow. Pick the most important piece to work on, but don't pick too many things to work on. Pick on what's important to you so you can focus your energies. It's important to show success. You need to be able to demonstrate to your folks as well as to your customers, your external customers, that you're moving forward, you're making progress. You try to take on too much all at once. You try to take on signs, on and on and on, pipes, everything. It was too much for us. And so our model was start slow. So we started with pavements. We're working on bridges now and bringing that in and doing the cross-asset, trying to get to cross-asset optimization on that. But it's really more about showing some progress because people will become frustrated. The people that are doing the work will become frustrated if you don't help them see that they're moving forward. So that was one of our lessons learned. We'll talk a little bit about a pretty cool truck. This is I guess that's a Hummer, huh? Out there measuring all kinds of stuff at highway speeds. I remember going out and putting a level on the road, measuring the depth of the ruts, and how fast it's changed. I remember being part of what do we have, 9 or 12 people on a survey crew. You ever see a survey crew now with more than one person? It's amazing what's happening with technology. And the message here is we used to measure all this stuff internally. And just as I said earlier that we had developed in-house our own maintenance management system, but we decided we couldn't keep up, we decided we really can't keep up with technology. We can't afford to keep up with technology for measuring our condition of our assets. So we've been outsourcing this for about 5 years. And I think there's real value in engaging the private sector to do this kind of work. And I think the value is that there's a lot of competition. I love competition. It forces everyone to be better. And that's what I tell our maintenance folks. Our maintenance folks, I think, have one of the toughest jobs because we don't outsource a lot of maintenance. Our maintenance force are not faced every day with competing to try to get work, like our design consultants or our contractors. It's amazing the ideas that come out of the competitive bidding process, especially on a design-build job. But for things like this, I'm convinced that we're never going to be in the business of actually going out and measuring condition of assets. We're going to engage the private sector because they're going to now do things that we never even thought possible. And so, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But I've got a little story here that I think is kind of neat. Our governor every year puts together a budget, as I'm sure the governors of every state does. And as a Department of Transportation, we are responsible for putting together the transportation portion of the governor's budget. Well, the legislature, the year before last, passed a bill that dedicated 30% in the growth of sales tax to go to capacity. Governor vetoed it. The legislature came back into session and overrode the veto. My boss wasn't happy. He wasn't happy at all. He wanted the money to go to education, one of his priorities. So when we were preparing the budget last August, September, October, November, goes on and on, the governor wanted to propose directing some of that growth in sales tax money to somewhere other than capacity. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to dedicate it to maintenance. So one of the scenarios we ran is we took $40 million. And what you see over here is I talked about us segregating out our pavement conditions. Here's the level 2. We call that's the roads with under 2,000 ADT. And you can see what's happening to those conditions over time. We've projected that out to 2020. And you can see those conditions of those roads are getting pretty poor. Nothing anyone's proud about. Well, under the governor's budget proposal, and we were able to do this with our payment management system, we're able to project what a $40 million additional investment would make if we put it just to those level 2s. And this was a pretty convincing story within the governor's budget. And we could never have done this if we did not have a fairly robust asset management system within the organization. And I wish I could tell you it sold the day. It didn't. We programmed the money to capacity because the legislature wanted to keep it there. So sometimes you find yourself in a very interesting position in a Department of Transportation. You work for the governor, but the legislature controls your budget at the end of the day. So you really follow the money. And so, but being able to do this analysis was, I think, very powerful for the strength of the technical analysis capability within our organization. Okay. Well, like I said, we're moving towards next steps, and many of you have probably blown through this already, but we're working on getting to a level where we can trade off between silos. We have separate prioritization processes for everything. I'll bet you somebody in the department has a prioritization process for whether to put milk or cream in their coffee. I don't know, but every silo in our organization. I mean, just within capacity, we have a prioritization process for new roads, a separate prioritization process for widening existing roads, a prioritization process for upgrading existing interchanges, a prioritization process for upgrading a new interchange, converting an intersection to an interchange. So for capacity alone, improving mobility, we must have 8, 9 prioritization processes. Then you have your pavement. Then you've got your, and then you have pavements within every funding category. You have, and functional classification. So it's very complex, as you know. And so we want to work now towards trying to bring everything together and be able to provide a much better level of analysis and recommendations. Because at the end of the day, as a department, we make recommendations to our Transportation Commission. The Transportation Commission, 7 lay people appointed by the governor, they make the final decisions in terms of funding allocations. We have a responsibility to provide the best information to our commission as possible. And so I want to do trade-offs now between pavement and bridge. I want to do trade-offs with safety. I want to bring in mobility and be able to look at the best way to spend the public's money. And that's where we need to be as a profession. And until we can start to do that, we're going to struggle at the state level as well at the federal level. And I'll talk a little bit about the federal level here as I start to wrap up. But it's important to understand, I've been critical of the direction or non-direction of our federal government in terms of transportation. I've argued with a senator and various staff members in public and in private. And by the way, lesson learned, it's not good to argue in a congressional testimony. They have absolute control. But until we can do that full cross-site asset optimization, we don't really have a leg to stand on. One of the things we keep arguing about is break down all the funding categories in Washington. And there's like 80 different funding categories of how you would spend your money. Why do they do that? Well, you could look at those funding categories as actually the vision for transportation. So there is an interstate maintenance category, and their vision is we're going to maintain the interstate system. But the way they do it is very constraining. And as a country, we could do a much better job optimizing the public's money if we could throw all the money into a bucket. I've been arguing for block grants for years. And then based on asset management, prioritization, and then measuring results, we can allocate that money in the best way possible to achieve the end results we want. But we're not there as an industry. We're not even at the point of having a discussion where people are talking with each other on this. We have people talking at each other right now, but we're not communicating well. So this, I think, is a key point for us in this trade-off analysis. We need to get there. Okay, we're almost done, guys. And then what I'll do is, I'm probably past time already, aren't I, Joe?
You're doing great.
I'm past time. Okay, so I was going to say I'm open for questions, but you guys can grab me a break if you'd like. Okay. This is something that we're pretty excited about right now. I just became aware of some technology at the Kentucky Maintenance Conference. I've had the opportunity to chair the maintenance subcommittee for AASHTO for a number of years. And part of my responsibility is to engage all the vendors that come and help support our events. And I ran into a vendor, I was speaking to him, and he was telling me that he had technology. He can drive down the road and collect retroreflectivity on all the signs, 65 miles an hour. I'm like, oh, come on. And he says, oh, we could do a lot of other stuff too. And so I got a business card. I gave it to Stan. Didn't hear anything about it then for probably 10 months. Lo and behold, Stan's gone out with an RFP, and he's looking for companies that can provide all kinds of information. Because in your organization, you got people that collect information on what? Everything out there, right? You've got people collecting information on stripes on the road, signs, height of bridges, pavement, rutting, friction, on and on and on. And I submit to you that a lot of times, a lot of those assets are collected individually. I know for us they are. And that won't happen anymore. Starting this year, we've got a contract now, and they're going to go out and they're going to collect all kinds of stuff. Now, I think there's some data people here, right? Some computer people. 19 terabytes. That sounds like a lot of information, doesn't it? Probably not to these guys that have big road systems. To us, that sounds like a lot of information. That's how much data is going to be collected as they pass. They're going to drive every road in the state and collect information. Some of it is going to be so detailed, we're going to try to use some of this for design. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to collect data once for all the different functions within the organization. It's all geo-referenced together, so we can think of the analysis you can do now. It's just remarkable what the potential is here. This is a screenshot of just kind of a workstation dump of the data that we're going to get. But we're going to be able to do analysis of, say there's an accident, and we're going to be able to do analysis of the geometrics, of the safety appurtenances, the height of the guardrail, the friction of the road. We're going to be able to do a much better job doing our job because we're bringing the information together in one shot. And what I'm really excited about is what we can do with this information. I don't even think we understand, I know we don't, at least I don't, understand the potential that's involved here with the technology and how it's evolving and how it touches every part of your business or can touch every part of your business. And I was sitting down with Jennifer at breakfast, and they were talking about running their pavement management system on 80,000 miles of roadway, and it brings the system to its knees, right? Much better now. It's a lot. It's a lot of data, and but we now have the computing horsepower to be able to do this, and it's going to change the way we do our business. So with that, I just want to leave you guys with a challenge here. I want to talk about where will you guys collectively take us as a transportation industry? Think about that. You may be sitting there saying, well, you know, that's up to Carlos, or that's up to Joe. Where's Joe going to take us? No. Why are they having this user conference? Because they want to hear from you. So where are you going to take us as an industry? And I think what you need to be thinking about, what are the questions that you get? Or what are the questions that your leadership should be asking so that you can then be able to have the tools to be able to provide the information for them? Think about it. We need to be able to bring data together from every aspect of our business. How are you bringing that information together, and how's it talking? I don't care what system it's in. I don't care if it's in AgileAssets or XYZ system. But how are we going to bring that information together? And then how are we going to use that information to leverage decisions? Because I'm convinced we're still not even asking a lot of the right questions. But your job here is to think about what those questions are that are being asked or should be asked that will take us as an industry forward and move us forward. Because this is really important stuff that you're here to work on. And you guys can make a big difference on this. We need to be thinking about how we collect information out on the road. Every one of you here today has a cell phone in your pocket. I'm sure of that. You probably have more computing power on your cell phone than the computers that we had on our desks in the 90s. What are your folks out in the field using to collect data? And how is that information being brought in and integrated with all of the data you have within the state? How are you using that information? We need better tools for gathering data and being able to reference it to existing data. We don't need to be constantly going out there doing things the old way. We need better tools for bringing data into our systems. I think one of the changes we're going to see, and I have to be careful how I say this, but I think one of the changes that we're going to see in our industry is we're going to see a greater movement towards outsourcing of maintenance work. We may outsource some maintenance activities today. I know Texas outsourced a few segments of roadway. Other states are much more active in this area. Florida is a very active state in outsourcing maintenance. Canada, I think, is on their third generation of outsourcing maintenance contracts. I'm convinced that we as DOTs are going to become leveraging organizations. We're going to move the fulcrum a little farther, and we're going to be doing less of the work. But we're going to need to manage those outsourcing contracts. And how we manage those outsourcing contracts is going to be important for us being responsible for the public's dollars. So you're no longer going to be able to basically control the people, the equipment, and how they do things. You're going to need to talk about outcomes, results. And you're going to be able to need to understand the input, money, how it equals the outcomes. And so how are the systems we have today and the tools we have today, how can they be used to help us move towards a greater outsourcing of maintenance work? I think that's an important thing that you guys need to keep in mind because you're the guys that are going to help drive those systems. And again, it's performance-based budgeting. It's about the money, and it's about knowing that where we put the money, that we're putting the money in the right place. And so we need to have more robust systems to be able to do performance-based budgeting within the tools that we have today. So those are just 4 thoughts that I had to try to stimulate you guys on the questions to be asking. Challenge our host, AgileAssets. Challenge them to give you the tools you need today and tomorrow. Because right now, They should be helping support you on the tools that they can give to you today, but they should be working in the back room on what you're going to need tomorrow. So don't just be thinking of today. Challenge yourself to think about tomorrow. With that, I apologize for going late. I really enjoyed being here, and you guys have been very polite. Thank you very much.